just a simple password system. But you have to think about all of the different ways that you can do multi-factor, right? You have hardware tokens, you have apps on your phones, you have actual SMS. But there are all problems with that. There's a definite usability issue. And so today, you're going to hear a story of how when usability met 2FA. And I'm going to have to read the list of the authors for this because it was a team effort for this. So it's going to be Hyunsu Kim, Junoh Lee, Kihong Heo, Kil Cha, and Myeong Geun Shin. This is a group from KAIST, which is the Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. So sit back, relax, and hear the story.
Hey, thanks for the great introductions. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I see. Great, thanks. So again, thanks for the introductions. And this is Hyunsu Kim from KAIST. In this talk, I'll present about how hard it is to strike a balance between usability and security, mainly in two-factor authentication. The title is When Usability Met 2FA. And this is a joint work with a group of our team. And we are all from KAIST. And if you heard of KAIST, that's great. Otherwise, let us begin with introducing ourselves. So we're currently in Korea, far away from Munich, as shown on the map. And Korea and Munich are about 13 hours far away in a single hop flight. So considering ourselves as a physically distant party, we really appreciate having a chance to present in the event online. And the picture is an overview of our campus, where you can see many buildings and grasses. And this is a picture of blossoms in full bloom in the campus last spring. And this is the building that we are currently in with green lawn. Yeah, and KAIST is one of the leading research institute in Korea. So the name stands for Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. The QS world ranking of KAIST is 41, which is moderately high. And especially in computer security, KAIST marks the 4th in Asia and 35th in the world. So that being said, one may imagine how tempting it is to launch a cyber attacks towards KAIST, as there are a bunch of classified experimental results and bleeding edge research in progress. Indeed, there has been and still happening attempts to exploit the ID service of KAIST. And some black hat hackers managed to leak the privacy information from library's electronic research node system. From the attack, more than 30,000 members' personal information were put in jeopardy. The incident was considered to be serious security breach, and the KAIST administration decided to enhance the security overall. So through the postmortem, KAIST decided to adopt two-factor authentication, that is, the well-known authentication mechanism that requires two proofs to identify a single user. I'm pretty sure that most of you may have seen and already experienced how it works when you're using service from maybe Google or GitHub. The authentication mechanism basically requires two distinct proofs, where one is what the user knows, such as password or PIN number. And the other proof shall be what the user physically possesses, for example, your mobile device, bank card, or even a USB stick. While it seems quite trivial to adopt 2FA mechanism throughout the institute, the problem was to consider the usability of 2FA at the same time. Since KAIST members include aged professors who usually are not familiar with complicated procedures to log into a certain simple service, the fact is that they think 2FA comes with no good and merely harms the usability. The security team in KAIST had to come up with a secure 2FA that is also convenient to use at the same time. So here's how it works. So here we demonstrate how the invented 2FA system works, and they call it easy authentication as marked with red box. And all you need to do is type your ID, which is, for example, beside Munich rocks, which is obvious. Then click the button, Soon the pop-up window shows up saying the authentication is in progress. Then a push alarm arrives to the user's mobile device saying attempt for the easy authentication is being detected. If you click on the push alarm, the custom app is launched and asks for the Face ID or Touch ID immediately. If success, the user is authenticated. And yeah, that is all for demonstrating how the system works. And I'm pretty sure most of you may have already found out how sloppy the system is being designed. Then, about several months after the suspicious 2FA was launched, in KAIST Graduate School of Information Security, there was an exciting course going on called Binary Code Analysis and Secure Software Systems. As the name of the course indicates, students were expected to learn binary level program analysis techniques to achieve the end goal, which is secure software system. And those pro hackers around the campus who usually solve hard CTF problems as a hobby gathered to take the course. And one day, the instructor of the course, Professor Kil Cha, announced the midterm, which was not simply testing one's knowledge. And the students were asked to find the vulnerabilities in KAIST Easy Authentication service. At the same time, he explicitly mentioned not to actually exploit the system at all. For the midterm, 24 hours were given to demonstrate the proof of concept and write a short report about it. And one of the pro hacker who was taking the course managed to hack into professor's account and submitted a screenshot showing oneself successfully got into the KAIST academic system as part of the report. And if he managed to do that, to do so, he could have manipulated the grades and so on. So the professor got embarrassed by the student, yet he was fairly satisfied with the performance of the students that they found many serious security threats of the system, much more than he thought. And here's the analysis of such vulnerabilities. So first of all, it is not even a proper 2FA. It's a single-factor authentication because it only requires the proof of having a device. And the ID itself cannot be a proof for the authentication. And it's as we have shown in the demonstration, it's very vulnerable to human error. One can accidentally authenticate the unknown request by mistake, and it is impossible to review or retrieve the given sessions. And the other vulnerability that we found was the authentication. The whole authentication procedure could be bypassed by circumventing entire authentication process. And we found it being the most powerful attack. And the reason why they had this vulnerability is they had to implement a new 2FA system over the deprecated authentication design. And there was a misalignment between the two. And this huge and serious vulnerability was there. And we can, in later this talk, we will shortly demonstrate how this attack works. And not only those two, we were able to find other more serious vulnerabilities. For example, ID leakage, DDoS, which is distributed denial of service, and IDOR, that stands for insecure direct object reference. And ID leakage is the vulnerability that user ID validity check API was public, so that it can be abused as an oracle for valid IDs by an attacker. And by enumerating valid IDs, hackers can arbitrarily select their target victim. And that denial of service using .NET could also be done with IP spoofing that makes the tracking nearly impossible. And also, lastly, IDOR is an access to an unauthorized resource. And again, this was the other vulnerability that comes with misalignment with, between the legacy system and the newly implemented system. So basically, there were other vulnerabilities due to poorly designed architecture of APIs. So here's a short demo that demonstrates the authentication bypass attack. First, the attacker can enumerate user IDs by going into the KAIST mail service, where you type in some string there, and it shows you the match of that string to certain KAIST members. For example, here we find Myeong Geun's ID, basically email address. And the finding is that most users have the same ID with the head of the email address. So we just use the head of the email address as an ID for the attack. And then we try to authenticate the user in the browser. And with proxy, for example, Fiddler, we intercept the login packet and then replace the login packet with the custom string that we manually find out. And by replacing it, one would successfully log in with victims authentication without knowing the password or having a device. So here's our suggested solutions to the institute. First, we strongly mentioned that rollbacking the password auth would be the trivial and most definite solution. And after that, although it needs the further backup solutions, but we were very clear to say that this must be done right away. But they didn't, but they rejected because of institute issue. And then we tried to suggest, we also said the original system itself is not a 2FA, and we have to go with proper 2FA that has to come with a password and device check altogether. And it was funny that there was already another service in KAIST, which is KAIST VPN service, that already comes with 2FA. And it requires you to enter password and one-time password via device together to get yourself authenticated. And then we also suggested to have session review and retrieval functionality in the system. So if you have, you may have seen this functionality in GitHub or Google, so that you can review the currently activated sessions, so that you can list up all the current sessions that is going on, and then you can selectively retrieve those sessions which seems to be spurious. For example, if you're in Germany, but you somehow found that some session were said to be in Korea, you may think that it's very spurious, right? So that you can retrieve that session. And then we had several iterated meetings with KAIST administration to get the system fixed, but they rejected they were pretty against with our suggestions, because the issue was usability. I mean, they agree with security issue, but as we go with proper 2FA, it kind of harms the entire usability so that they cannot go for it. So with the suggestions, we kept on suggesting other measures to make it secure through the several meetings with the security administrations. The only change they made was to pop the number up on the screen on both the browser and the mobile app. And so that the user, before granting access with Face ID or Touch ID in the mobile app, the user would hopefully check if the number shown on the app matches with that of a browser, so that the user won't mess up with, mistakenly authenticate other requests or attack by a certain hacker by mistake. And it partially mitigates the vulnerability as it helps to confirm which access is likely to be malicious or not. And some may ask if can this be said to be understood to be fixed solution? And definitely it's no. So in conclusion, our takeaway message is as follows. First, implementing easy-to-use 2FA without weakening the security is very tricky. So, as we have seen in the last slide, the improved version is still not a proper 2FA. And second, software testing and formal verification should help in its proper design. And the two methods are traditional yet effective ways to find bugs and guarantee the desired software property. And here's the references for our work. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
So, do we have any questions for our speaker today? One in the back. Morten is going. He's going.
Testing. Seems to be working. Hi. On the issue of usability versus security versus usability, there's several systems that don't require user input, but you just talked about just having proof of a USB stick you put in. What's your stance on FIDO2 tokens and stuff like that, where you don't have to input anything, but it's just there and you just have to attach it?
Sorry, I cannot understand you.
Should I repeat? I'll try. What's your opinion on passwordless login procedures through hardware tokens in the security versus usability issue?
Security token. Password itself is not a. It is a traditional way to authenticate, but it is also traditionally known to be unsafe, right? Because password only is very error prone to human errors, and using USB stick is, together with USB stick, you can achieve better security, I guess. That for sure. Am I getting your question right? Or am I missing?
I think part of the question is, so when you have a security token on a USB, for example, what role does usability play there? Is it easier? Is it less easy? Does it make it better for users if they just have to use one of these security tokens? Or
you mean is security token? You mean the number shown on the screen?
Nope. We're talking about There are USB devices that have basically set it up so that using cryptography, you can plug it in and basically identify as yourself. And so that's commonly used as a form of authentication. And so in that case, a person only has to have this hardware authentication and then their login and password, of course.
Oh, I see. And how does that come with usability?
Correct.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Oh, and I think that's a good question. But I think if you have USB stick, you may have hard time using logging into the certain service through your mobile device where you cannot easily plug in the USB stick, right? So I think that kind of harms the usability still if we go for USB stick. Will that answer your question?
Yep. Did that answer? Okay. We got a thumbs up. Very good. So any other questions for our speaker? I'm checking the time. I actually have a question for you, and that was bad feedback. So you said that there was an entire team or an entire group of people looking at this in a class. And I'm wondering, what kinds of tools did you use to investigate the implementation of multi-factor?
Oh.
You mentioned Fiddler. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Fiddler was the option. And I only used Fiddler. I have to ask other team. And basically, Python. Python's great.
Okay. And then my final, so the class that you were taking though focused on, basically finding vulnerabilities in code. So what kind of tooling do you do or do you use in that course to actually find vulnerabilities in code?
Oh yeah. We use, IDA Pro for sure. Ghidra and GDB, of course. Yeah, I think that's all. And and we write our exploit with Python and using Pon. I cannot recall the name of the library right now.
Okay. And then for the solution that you analyzed, I didn't get at the beginning, was it a homegrown solution?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Would you ever recommend to build your own multi-factor solution, or should you just buy it off the shelf?
I think it's I would buy it off the shelf because it's very trivial to satisfy the 2FA property so that you won't get any additional benefit by having it yourself, unless you have a very clear idea that can, balance, guarantee other properties such as usability here. And if the purpose is just for security, I would buy it off the shelf. But if you do it something more fun, I'll definitely go for myself.
Cool. All right. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay. Then thank you so much for your time today. It was great to hear about your story, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.